Let's have a conversation about restorative practices. Picture a student in your classroom that gets in trouble, right? Or a kid that gets in trouble in your school. They may have broken a rule or done something that they shouldn't have done. So, what happens next? Is it an adversarial situation with yelling and attitude from both the student and teacher? Is there detention, in school suspension, or out of school suspension? Or is there a discussion and reflection? If your answer is the latter, then your school community is using restorative practices. If your answer is the former, it might be time to make a change. Restorative practices aim to curb classroom behavior through discussion, reflection, and meaningful relationships. Building relationships with any student is extremely important for educators and ultimately makes your job easier. However, it is important to build relationships with the challenging or difficult students so that when the inevitable happens, they may slip up, you're able to better help them discuss and reflect upon their actions effectively. Restorative practices aims to be respectful to all students, to everyone who's involved in an incident, right? Restorative practices provide an opportunity for equitable dialogue and participatory decision making. It allows students when deciding what to do, what happens next. Like you really get to discuss like what you did, how could you approach the same situation differently in the future. Restorative practices also encourages all parties involved to take responsibility for their actions, holding them accountable and determine the best way to move forward. Principals and assistant principals are beginning to adopt restorative practices in their schools, and many teachers are struggling to accept it. Teachers sometimes take negative or undesirable behaviors in a classroom personally, and they want to see students punished for those behaviors. But those days are starting to come to an end in several school districts. Administrators are learning about adopting restorative practices. They are building relationships with students and talking to them about their actions. They're coming up with a game plan for moving forward and determining how students can better deal with the same situation in the future. They're no longer simply handing out punishments without a conversation or dialogue. The more that teachers know about restorative practices, the easier it will be to understand what happens with your students after you've sent them out your classroom due to a classroom issue. So, learn about restorative practices and implement it today.